So, greetings and salutations, listeners, to this Messages for Men podcast with me, Elizabeth Hobson, and Max Anthony. How are you doing, Max?
I'm okay. I didn't really know we were doing this until very recently, so I've just kind of climbed out of the well of looking into what we're going to be talking about this evening.
Indeed, and what we are going to be talking about this evening is a lovely article with a father's theme, since it is Father's Day in the UK today, and it is written by a Mr. Jordan Shapiro, who wrote a book called Father Figure: How to Be a Feminist Dad. Max, could you sell that book to us, please?
Sell that book to you?
Yeah.
That would be. I think that would probably go against my moral compass to do that. But
tell the audience what you told me a few minutes ago.
Oh well, I don't know whether that would make sense to go into that kind of stuff. After just people getting an idea of kind of what this book is, because so I mean the article that you found, Elizabeth, is kind of adapted from that book. So I'm assuming this is him trying to condense down some of his kind of main points, or coherent points, right, into 4 ways to be a feminist dad, which obviously the link will be in the description. So or show notes or whatever. So I suppose we could go through the 4 ways, if you like, which I mean with I suppose it depends on when on kind of what order we're releasing these things, but we recently went through a 7 kind of
ways to be simp.
So this one isn't 7. This is only 4 ways to be a feminist dad. But of course, I think anyone listening to this will quickly realize that when we kind of quote from this, it's like these are not kind of coherent actual ways that you can like Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life, right? You have kind of actual you can sum up what they are. And didn't he release or sell some kind of actual wall art, like posters?
Oh, did he?
Oh no, I'll have to. I assume those are still. We'll have to look that up.
All of them though. I want is 12 more rules too. I want the full collection in print.
You'll need a bigger wall. That's 24.
Space. There's always space for more art, more wall art. Although, because it's been so hot recently, the command hooks that I've got all of my pictures up with, but several of them, which in all fairness probably were inadequately big command hooks for the pictures they were holding, they've started giving up.
Oh dear.
Off the wall. Luckily nothing's broken by some miracle.
So recently in a stream you did recently a balloon burst, and
it was a loud sound. Yes, there was a loud sound.
So we're going to have the same problem in this episode, aren't we, where something's going to.
No, because you see, the thing is, they only fall down when I'm not in the house.
Is that like a rule? Okay.
It's like a rule, yeah. So we should be fine. But yeah, no, I thought that before we launched into some of Jordan's actual ideas, you could read the blurb on his website. So, whet people's appetites.
Oh, so there's
That's
yeah,
why
I suppose
ask you to sell it.
so there's a I mean, I suppose it depends how long we want to go, but like there's so the kind of the blurb kind of like it's about 3 paragraphs. It's not that long or anything, but it's one of those occasions where I think he has to try and sound quite I don't know, is it called burying the lead? I'll read it out and we'll see if since you said I may as well, you're the director here, so technically you're the boss, so yeah, I'll do it. Why was I even rambling? Anyway, I'll read it out. So from digital age parenting expert Jordan Shapiro, a thoughtful and long overdue exploration of fatherhood and masculinity in the 21st century. There are hundreds of books on parenting, and with good reason. Becoming a parent is scary, difficult, and life-changing. But when it comes to books about parenting identity, rather than the nuts and bolts of raising children, nearly all are about what it's like to be a mother. Drawing on research in sociology, economics, philosophy, gender studies, and the author's own experiences, Father Figure sets out to fill that gap. It's an exploration of the psychology of fatherhood from an archetypal perspective, as well as a cultural history that challenges familiar assumptions about the origins of so-called traditional parenting roles. What paradoxes and contradictions are inherent in our common understanding of dads? Might it be time to rethink some aspects of fatherhood? Gender norms are changing and old economic models are facing disruption. As a result, parenthood and family life are undergoing existential transformation. And yet the narratives and images of dads available to us are wholly inadequate for this transition. Victorian and industrial age tropes about fathers not only dominate the media, but also contour most people's lived experience. Father Figure offers a badly needed update to our collective understanding of fatherhood and masculinity in general. It teaches dads how to embrace the joys of fathering while guiding them toward an image of manliness for the modern world.
That actually sounds really good. Yeah, I would buy that based on that.
Yeah, but then of course, obviously, you know, once you kind of get into things a bit, like so if you scroll down, for example, from that kind of, I'd agree, it's a kind of, I suppose there are kind of tiny little warning, like red flags
Yeah,
that most people I don't think would pick up on them, but as soon as you scroll down and you see that they have so the book can be bought as part of a Rad Dad Deluxe Edition Father's Day gift box, which is $159, and it includes, for example, a "My husband is a radical feminist" bumper sticker, a feminist dad apron, and little collectible buttons that say "Cancel Patriarchy" and "Man Up to Feminism," which have designs on them that would be like indistinguishable from parodies, like as in, like, put it this way, the "Man Up to Feminism" button has a uterus on it, right? So you have kind of a reasonable sounding description, but then you quickly determine that this is actually like
this is not the droid you're looking for.
Well, I was tempted to suggest that, like, with his name being what it is, I was tempted to suggest that this is like what you would get if you got Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and they just kind of did a real. They ran at each other really, really fast, like head-butting each other, and like they just kind of knocked the sense out of both of them, and then somehow they were kind of meshed together, and you have Jordan Shapiro. And maybe
the power of neither.
And yeah, the power of neither. Maybe the image is funnier in my head than it might
Well,
otherwise be.
Me, do you remember? Do you watch Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey?
Is that the sequel?
Yeah.
I think I did see that.
Where they die and they meet death, and then there's two evil Bill and Teds and all that.
The evil ones?
Yeah, evil Bill and Teds. They're totally bogus to the princesses.
Right.
But anyway,
do you mean
because they've got in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, there's like these kind of alien creatures called Station, and they're like these big furry gonk type things, and they're really clever, like really good engineers, and they can build things. But at some point, like, they need a power up, so they walk to either end of a car park and then run at each other really fast and like collide and then become one big station that's still super cute.
Okay, I'll have to like try and like look that up or something, because I thought you were talking about the movie that was recently
Oh no, that's like a sequel to the sequel or something.
Right, that's where I'm getting.
It has that come out already?
That came out a while ago.
Did it? See, I remember when it was announced and I was like, is it? Because I really like Bill and Ted. And I'm willing to give this modern Bill and Ted a chance. I was kind of disappointed that there was daughters in it, not gonna lie. Made me a bit meh, but okay. You know, give it a chance.
I'm afraid that we're slightly slipping into like a review of the we'll have to do that. We'll have to watch it and then do a review of it. Like from my memory,
it is related, because obviously Bill and Ted in this modern one are fathers, and this is a Father's Day podcast. We should list all the films we know with fathers in.
You are like, see, this is one of the, you're like, that's good. That worked very well. Like without even knowing. That was I wouldn't have thought to do that, but you managed to make it relevant. Even so from my memory of that movie, right, the one with the two daughters, right?
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of bits in it that will make you kind of roll your eyes and think, are they trying to reboot this? Like in the same way that like the start of the Terminator 3 movie, where they have the female Terminator, right? The first thing they do is kind of make Arnold Schwarzenegger, like make the actual Terminator look stupid by putting on some like parodying the kind of original kind of film, in that he puts on some glasses and they're stupid glasses, that kind of thing. So I think there are a couple of indications in the Bill and Ted like sequel to the whatever, where you kind of think, oh, is that what they're going to try and do? Are they going to, essentially shit on the original?
That would be my concern. Yes.
So I think there are bits in it that would make you kind of worry, and then other bits that you kind of think, okay, I don't think they're trying to do that, and then you'd kind of think, oh, maybe they are trying to do that, and then so they don't. I think it's because they have to keep the daughters as being related to the fathers, because otherwise it would kind of it wouldn't make sense. So the actresses do a good job of being the daughters to those two,
right?
Rather than like so say if you gave the script to certain feminist screenwriters we could name, they would have the daughters being the exact opposite, and humiliating the kind of the now redundant characters that are going to be. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would expect from some feminist screenwriters that you would have a story wherein Father Bill and Father Ted are like, oh, daughters of ours, but you are too weak and feminine to go on an adventure. And then like the daughter's going on an adventure, and then the dad's chasing after them, and then the daughter's having to save the dads, and the dads realizing that their daughters were much stronger than they ever realized, is what I would expect.
Yeah, see, I think maybe what's happened is that it's a little bit like it's kind of put together by a committee. So there are elements of that. Like there are parts of that where you're just like, oh, you know. So I mean, maybe if you don't want to have your kind of fond memories
bubble burst,
you might like theoretically want to kind of give it a miss, because there will be moments in. I mean, it's good in to its. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, you know, is it a bit of a lark? I can suspend my innate kind of critical gender eye if a film is a good lark.
Yeah, so I think it's possible that the one of the first, it's not a draft, but what's the other, there's a word for it in screenwriting now, I don't remember. Yeah, so it's like they kind of took a framework that was put together by the kind of people, like, even if they're not necessarily feminist screenwriters, they're kind of doing what would be kind of expected of them culturally, right? Which would be the kind of thing you described, because of the kind of kind of poisoning from that kind of mentality. But then I think there are numerous points within that film where the kind of the feminist, or kind of unthinking feminist, kind of functioning feminist, but not kind of describing themselves as a feminist, but like functioning like one, would, like an actual feminist screenwriter would, you know, be banging fists on the table going, no, that's not what I meant, don't do that. Like, so there are little bits in it where it detours from what certain people would hope for it to be.
Have you got a favourite filmic father?
I have to think about that one.
I can tell you mine, like, in a snap.
Are we gonna annoy the audience by going off on this tangent about movies? And
well, I don't know, but I'm having fun.
Okay, so go on then.
Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. He's a great filmic father.
See, that reminds, that's interesting, because that ties it, that connects to, I think, the thing that when the thing that popped into my head when you asked me that question. So there's a part of, there's the ending of the film Vanilla Sky, which gets like a certain amount of well, it doesn't get it now because obviously it's like ages ago, but are you a reasonable temperature, Elizabeth? Are you okay?
Yeah, for the sake of listeners, We are on video as we record this podcast, and it is super hot, and I have a fan, and I'm holding my hands to a fan like you might on a winter's day to a warm fire, and it's really nice.
You can always turn it up to full power, like, you know.
Yeah, but my palms get warm. I have just turned it up to full power. Can you hear it?
I can now, but it's not a big deal.
I'll put it on half power.
Yeah.
So Vanilla Sky. I feel like I've seen it. Isn't it got Tom Cruise in it or something?
Yeah, it's got Tom Cruise in it, and it's a kind of reimagining kind of yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be it's a remake in that various parts of it are kind of shot for shot. I don't know how we're getting off onto this is you know, Jordan Shapiro will be listening to this as kind of someone will have heard, you know, someone will have sent him a tweet on Twitter going, there's a couple of horrible, scary, evil people, and they review your book and take the mick out of your article, and then he'll just reply to them, be like, are you sure? When are they going to get around to talking about me? You know, but yeah. So it's Vanilla Sky is a remake of a Spanish film called Abalós, which I'm probably like not pronouncing that very well, which is the Spanish Open Your Eyes, right? Is the yeah. And so, like, spoiler alert, right? Even though obviously this was released back in 2001, so you know, it's like it's a while ago. So you know, but so there's the reason I might be mistaken, but when you said It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah.
There's in the end, where, not to give like too many spoilers or anything, was also like, it sounds like you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it, it's been like quite a while ago, so it makes sense. You know, it'd be good for
exactly.
But so that's why I'm going to be very careful about it. But like near the very end of the film, there's a character talking about the he's talking to the main character. He's talking to Tom Cruise, and he's kind of he's kind of very like giving him like hints at what he's seen in his life that has had an impact and that has shaped quite literally the life that he's kind of made for himself. So it's a shame that I can't kind of look up the kind of quote or anything, because that would be like I'd probably be able to read it out and it wouldn't spoil anything. So he's describing, he mentions a figure that he mentions a celebrity that reminded him of his mother, which then caused him to see, it's really difficult to explain this without spoilering it for you, but you know, so I
think you should just spoiler it.
No, it won't be, that won't be good. But so, and I might be mistaken, but the example that he gives, the example that this kind of authority figure character gives as to where his idea of fatherhood came from, I think one of the things that flashes up on the screen is that character from It's a Wonderful Life.
I see where you're going with this. Yeah, I mean, I think that I should spoiler It's a Wonderful Life somewhat to let people know why I think that, you know, why Jimmy Stewart is my favourite filmic father. I mean, it came out in 1946, so.
Yeah, and not just that, but it's like an extraordinarily well-known work. Like, you know, it's
also, it's not only, you know, is he the most fantastic filmic father, it's also the most fantastic Christmas film. I watch it every Christmas, and every Christmas I cry. But yeah, I mean, so Jimmy Stewart just plays a bloody good man who sacrifices an awful lot. So when he's a kid, he jumps into a frozen lake to save his brother and ends up going deaf in one ear, which leads to him being unable to join the army at the outbreak of World War II. But he wants to travel. He's wanted to travel since he was a little kid, and he decides not to so he can help run the family business, which is a bank. And the sort of main reason he makes that decision is because he knows that the other bank owner in the area is a tyrant, and Jimmy Stewart feels it's incumbent on himself to protect his community. And then, you know, he's a very loving husband, and he's very fun and intense. And then he has a really bad day because his uncle, who's working at the bank, is traveling with a load of money, taking it across town for some reason I fail to remember, but somehow the old tyrant manages to get his hands on this money, which is like everything that the bank has. And so, you know, Jimmy Stewart's kind of gonna be in court, charged with embezzlement, and he can't, nobody can withdraw money from the bank, and so the community's all gonna suffer, and everything's gone to shit. And I mean, there's a incredible scene where he's considering suicide, and I can't remember whether it's actually no, it must be before that. Before that, he goes home and he's short with his daughter and quite unpleasant, which, you know, is all very understandable and realistic in the circumstances. But then at the end of the movie, he holds his daughter for dear life because he's so sorry that he was not nice to her. And there's something so visceral and real and earthy and beautiful and desperate and wonderful about the way he does it. And it's an image that really sticks with me. And it's so honest, you know, because as a parent, you won't always have great days, and you won't always be, you know, the ideal parent that you want to be, but it's all right. And as long as you love your children dearly, you know, and make it up to them and apologize. And oh, the other interesting point I was going to make about the film actually was that apparently I read a few years ago, which is nothing to do with fathers or Father's Day, but it's interesting that one of the things that Jimmy Stewart channeled that comes out in this film is the post-traumatic stress disorder that he suffered from after his actual experiences in World War II. And apparently he had a really hard time making the film because he was so troubled. And, you know, I just find that very moving. It's another moving aspect of the film. So have you thought of your favourite filmic father while I've been rambling?
No, I've been listening intently to everything you've been saying. You should have given me some kind of secret signal that instead of listening to you, I should have been thinking of my own. So when you said the moment you said he was holding his daughter, right? And you said that earthy and authentic, that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I'm guessing, I'm not certain, but I'm guessing that quite possibly is the shot that they used to kind of flash up in at the end. Like I'm thinking, I could be completely wrong, but I would bet a certain amount of money that you're not the only ones who have said this image here is like really powerful and really this is what we want. This is the image to use. So I'm willing to bet that I'm willing to bet.
There's something about it. It just jumps out of the screen and grabs you by the heart and squeezes, and you have to cry. You do. So, while you're giving some thought to my question, shall we discover 4 ways to, in fact, be a feminist dad?
Well, is that exactly how he words it? Hang on.
Well, that's the line.
What?
That's
right, yeah.
Parents.com.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I was just like, yeah. So, obviously we'll include a link to it, but this is not like some random person on like just some kind of blog that gets no comments or anything. Like this is literally parents.com, and and this weird, strange, like headbutt creation of Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro has like 113,000 followers on Twitter, and of course his pronouns are there as well, just in case anyone is unsure what his pronouns might be. But I think it's a shame to go from talking about something heartwarming and real to what is essentially a kind of the opposite, because while of course it isn't said in such terms, when they like talking about a long overdue, no, it's not there, it's somewhere else in my notes, because I think I'd said this before, like praise on the website includes, this pandemic has revealed a crisis in American caregiving. I hope Shapiro's fearless book kickstarts a woke dad revolution, because goddess knows we need one. And that's from Anya something, NPR correspondent and author, right? But there's no, I think it is in the description. Yeah, father figure offers a badly needed update to our collective understanding of fatherhood and masculinity in general. So I think that was one of the things that I was talking about when I said about there being red flags, right? Would you agree that was that's one of those examples where,
yeah, an update of masculinity in general and fatherhood, that's a red flag.
A badly needed update to our collective understanding of fatherhood and masculinity in general. and I get the feeling that the kind of thing that they're like, I suppose the only way to know is to kind of get inside there, or like, you know, you kidnap this Jordan Shapiro guy, right? Put him in a fMRI, right, and have him watch It's a Wonderful Life and kind of see what the results are, right? But
Yeah.
there would be numerous problematic things in that film to do with behavior and how would I put it? Not just the expectations, but the kind of, I imagine they'd describe it as the performative role, right? Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah, and it's very much, you know, I mean, it's 1946, so, you know, everyone is living in gender stereotypical kind of fashion. I suppose the only bit that could be called, or, you know, that a feminist might like, is that the town slut needs a hand, and Jimmy Stewart is compassionate and helps her to go and live a better life without judgment.
I suppose I'd have to watch that bit again to kind of.
The town also, she has this brilliant line where she sees Jimmy Stewart and he comments on her nice dress, and she says, "This old thing, why, I only wear this when I don't care how I look," which I often repeat to people and they just look at me strangely.
Speaking of like that's not like a crazy thing to say, but one of the things that occurred to me while I was kind of reading like parts of this article while you were in a meeting and stuff before we started recording, it occurred to me that like if you don't like people, right? So if you're like, oh, this COVID thing is brilliant, I don't have to socialize with anyone. People suck. I can just, you know, I can stay home and just tap on my computer, and I don't have to interact with anyone in the world, right? It occurred to me that if you're at the supermarket or wherever and you wanted to make people leave you alone, all you would have to do is like kind of learn some quotes from this article, and everyone would give you like a seriously wide berth. As in like those cargo ships that take like 8 miles to turn around, like, you know. So like an example of this, so it's not like we're making these in order, but yeah, like an example of this. So he says, so he's talking about a feminist dad. He says, a feminist dad, quote, tries to view the world through a critical intersectional lens and aims to identify, interrogate, and then reframe problematic and unjust narratives. He's also critical of the financial, economic, political, technological, and legal structures that are designed to steer us away from questioning patriarchal thinking. A feminist takes this stance even when the self-referential gaze burns because his beloved privileges are at stake when he's forced to acknowledge things he'd rather not. Like, if you say that to someone in Morrison's, they will leave you alone. Like, regardless of, like, it doesn't, you could literally take their wallet, right, and then say the kind of the stuff in here, right, and they will just be like, no, keep the wallet, mate, I'm fine. They're just,
you can have it.
yeah, they'll just be like.
But if you like said it to someone in Waitrose, you might get a date.
I hope that we're kind of painting Waitrose visiting people with an uncharacteristically broad brush or something there.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll be honest. I have shopped at Waitrose before. It's not unknown. But oh darn it. Blinking Telegraph. I'm just because Waitrose is pretty woke though, isn't it? And there are some instances. Apparently, they've renamed Kaffir Limes after complaints that it's racist. What else have they been doing? I was trying to open an article before and it was from the Telegraph, but that's no good because the Telegraph's behind a paywall.
Reminds me to tell you how to bypass that.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I can't remember what they have been saying, but it wasn't the Kaffir Lime thing. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that tangent about supermarkets is my fault.
Where were we? So yes. You know what's one of the things that sticks out to me in that little passage you read is what are the technological structures designed to steer us away from questioning patriarchal thinking? Because like technology's been a massive leveler, hasn't it? It's like liberated women from the limitations of our biology, and you know, obviously, I mean, he talks about the economic structures, and that's all linked to technology. And hasn't that disadvantaged more men and advantaged more women? Because women are, or you know, there are now a lot of fields that are open to women because of technology, whilst technology has rendered a lot of traditionally male dominated jobs redundant.
So you mean like automation and whatnot,
yeah,
like assembling cars and
exactly.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's like, obviously this is like we could have a whole other discussion about this, but like, as far as I'm concerned, it's basically changed them. So it hasn't like, so in the same way that when you look at old footage, when like the first production lines for cars,
yes,
obviously you have just kind of rows and rows of men picking up, you know, like picking up large, you know, like
sheets of metal and putting them on other sheets of metal and all of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course now you have the case where you essentially have, you know, huge production lines of you know, automated, you know, like to call them robotic arms, I think is kind of is not giving them the kind of credit where they're due of kind of how sophisticated those machines are.
Arms are pretty sophisticated. I bet you line a more sophisticated arm or something than what we've got. Arms are good.
Okay. So the really, like, so you cut out a bit there, so that's why I was but so in the same way that it's not rows and rows of men, you know, just welding cars together by hand, right? It's the case that you then have rows and rows of men designing and building. Well, obviously you have to, you have robotic arms assembling robotic arms, and it's all turtles all the way down. But you have those robotic arms, to kind of simplify it, need to be programmed and need to, all that kind of stuff. I mean,
but it's not the case where, like, when we had the transition from horse and carts to car manufacturing, the horse and cart kind of wheelwrights and all of those fellas lost their jobs, but significantly more jobs were created in factories making cars. It is, as you describe, robotic arms and robotic other things doing more and more and more, and the job supply diminishing for human beings. And I'm not casting a sort of value judgment on that. Maybe, I mean, it's the way we're going, and we'll work out how we deal with that. But, I think that it would be fair to say that in this technological, it's not quite a revolution, but, as part of this development, more men have been disadvantaged as compared to women. Don't you think?
I suppose like the thing that occurred to me when you were talking about jobs being replaced with systems that require far fewer jobs, like I was thinking, one of the things that occurred to me was like I've seen documentaries and footage of inside Amazon warehouses, those ridiculously massive, and you would think that it would just be loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of men in high-vis jackets.
Yeah.
Because it's a warehouse, right? People go, well, it's a warehouse
with 0 hours contracts. That is what I imagine. High-vis, 0 hours.
Yeah. What it kind of actually is there's quite a few women in those. Someone's gonna be able to kind of look up the stats and correct me, but just from what I've seen, there are quite a few women working in those warehouses, because the automation it's kind of half and half. So so no one, like, obviously, certain heavy things need lifting, right? But a significant amount of it is just putting labels on things, or checking something, or like just scanning a barcode, and all, so there are plenty of women in those environments. And so when and obviously this is evidently Amazon's goal, right, to get it to the point where you can have something in a fulfillment center and then delivered right to the person's door without a human having to directly touch that parcel at all. That is indeed their goal, whether they say it or not. That is indeed, what they're trying to aim towards, and that affects women in just the same way that it affects men, if that makes any sense.
Yes, that does. That does indeed make sense. I tell you what wasn't a woman, though. It wasn't a woman who, upon discovering that someone's, the Amazon, like, food cupboard or whatever it's called, they have like a grocery section now. Some customer ordered tampons, but they didn't have any, and so they sent a replacement, and the replacement was frozen sausage rolls.
Right. Okay. And how did the story end?
Well, messily, I imagine.
Well, I was expecting you to say that, you know, she started, you know, smashing the little drone that delivered her shopping to her, as indeed they are piloting in various places. You know,
are you suggesting that women are irrational and grumpy on their period? Because I believe that's misogyny.
When faced with with some frozen sausage rolls, I think absolutely anyone has a kind of, like, you know, I think that's a kind of reasonable excuse. I think you're probably giving this Jordan Shapiro guy too much credit, though, when you suggest that he's actually kind of thought about it, because you know how you can kind of quickly like, I don't think it's a you
roll off words. Roll off words.
Well, no.
Words.
No, I mean that like, you can quickly. I don't think it's just my superpower, right? But like, you can quickly determine that, like, a kind of patterns in someone's speech, right? So, and even though I've only like read very little from this guy, you can tell quite quickly that he likes to kind of list stuff. Like, so here's another example. So a feminist dad extends his commitment to equality beyond just cisgender prejudices, fighting to create a safer world for transgender, non-binary, and other gender non-conforming individuals too. In fact, he rejects all forms of discrimination, exploitation, indignity, and coercion. He knows that consent is a prerequisite not only for sex, but also for education, work, religion, spirituality, psychology, policy, and play. Like, you can tell that he's the kind of person who he likes to, as far as he's concerned, a sentence isn't a proper sentence unless it has a kind of it kind of ends in a kind of list of things. Like, that makes any kind of sense. And like, I get the feeling that he's definitely that kind of person, because it's just like, it's noticeable, like a lot, you know. So I'm while Elizabeth is,
but it should be a list of relevant and justifiable words.
yeah, but like, whether they're relevant or justifiable, I think he probably he probably doesn't really focus too much on that. But yeah, I mean, it like, once you see him doing that, you can't kind of unsee it. So he says, my process of becoming a feminist dad includes these 4 foundational principles. This is how I've learned to practice recognizing and reconsidering the unconscious and regrettable ways that I participate in sexist, patriarchal, binary, misogynistic systems and structures. I hope you can learn to do the same. Which, it's funny that later on he talks about he talks about a kind of narcissistic, he talks about this means you're practice responsible fathering. This means you're adaptable, reflexive, and open to diverse and multifaceted perspectives. You're dedicated to counteracting narcissistic patriarchal authority. And I was thinking, you know, when he's all kind of like, oh, I hope you can learn to do the same. I mean, like, if anyone sounds like a narcissist.
Yeah, it's interesting, that bit from the passage you read earlier, about how the feminist dad knows that consent is a prerequisite not only for sex but also for education, work, religion, spirituality, psychology, policy, and play. Because it's, I mean, first of all, it's like, well, I mean, consent, depending on how you define it, I think everyone agrees with a very, you know, with a reasonable definition of consent for anything we do in life. But obviously we, you know, a feminist father knows that a reasonable definition of consent is not enough. You know, it's got to be affirmative consent and all of that. And the idea of affirmative consent for education and work, especially work, is like, that's a luxury that most people don't have. You know, Mr. I write books for a living and have loads of Twitter followings. Well, you know, he might be able to affirmatively consent to his work, but most people just have to get through the day and earn their money so they can look after their families and keep a roof over their heads. And also, I think it's interesting that, you know, the idea of consent for play, because play is it's all about consent. Children grow up and one of their foundational developmental lessons is that people won't play with you unless they want to. And so you have to make yourself acceptable to other people and not be horrible, or they won't play with you. However, one of the amazing things about the play that fathers have with their children, you know, which is quite well recognized and, you know, studied, is the idea of, you know, the way fathers push boundaries. Like Warren Farrell talks about how mums sit back watching their husbands rough and tumble play with their children, and mum's thinking it's all going to end in tears, and it all ends in tears, and then dad says, well, you know, that's it now, and the children are even more upset because they want to continue, but they go on as this process happens again and again to learn the boundaries. And so, you know, the sort of consent that I believe, and I have reason to believe, that Jordan Shapiro is talking about with regards to play, I don't think is a good way of helping your children to develop. It's not a good, it's a way that robs them of opportunities to fine-tune their sensitivity to the limits of what is, you know, fun and what is too far.
Yeah, I would imagine, like, I suppose for some reason I'm kind of thinking of that part of the Gillette advert with the two boys, evidently
Boys will be boys.
Well, it's been a while since I've seen it, but if I'm not mistaken, the two boys, they're kind of rough and tumble, or so they're you know, they're kind of play fighting or wrestling, right? And then, you know, it's shown that they kind of that the feminist dad kind of comes in and kind of separates them, and, you know, that kind of. So I would bet that Jordan Shapiro here would have very, very different attitude, a very different attitude to you when it comes to the role of being able to kind of teach that kind of boundary of it. He would be, I'd be willing to bet that he'd have a kind of very different idea. Like, maybe we'll have to order a copy of his actual book and do what we do, where we
actually, you know what? I found a really good site that has books. I wonder if it's in there, like in PDF, but it has loads of like new releases and bestsellers and all kinds that you can download in PDF. And so I'm leaning away from putting any money in Jordan Shapiro's pocket. I'm going to look it up. It's the Z Library, everyone. It's great. Oh no, I'm writing Jordan Peterson. Freudian slip.
Elizabeth is not at all recommending piracy of books or anything of that nature at all.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But there's another bit I find interesting here, where he says that it's a feminist dad's duty to raise people who are prepared to challenge all forms of sexism, misogyny, injustice, and oppression. Because I just don't, that it's clearly indoctrination, but I think that's a pretty rotten way of parenting, because it's like, maybe your kid wants a quiet life. Why don't you raise your kid to self-actualize? And if that means that they're going to be feminist activists, well, you should support them in that in any appropriate way. But, like the idea that it's almost like you have to sacrifice your children to the cause.
Yeah, I mean that. This is where that whole consent thing kind of goes out the window. Right. Like, so as far as he's concerned, so I think it's best to kind of read out that little quote, right? So either you can or I can. Do you want me to?
I think you should, because I've scrolled away.
Yeah, so in other words, feminist dad doesn't ask, how do I prepare my children for the tough realities of a gendered world? Instead, he acknowledges that it's his duty to raise people who are prepared to challenge all forms of sexism, misogyny, injustice, and oppression. So as far as I'm concerned, he's getting it completely backward. So there's that phrase of don't tell your children, don't teach your children what to think, teach them how to think, right? That's kind of
amen. I said amen. Yes.
Yeah, there's that kind of basic. Now, obviously, to some degree, especially when children are young, you need to teach them what to think, because you don't teach them how to work out that water that's boiling is going to like have you end up in the emergency room. You tell them ahead of time, so I mean, so there's a kind of it's a bit of both, but it is indeed just completely the opposite, that you should indeed ask yourself, how do I prepare my children for the tough realities of the world, right? Whether you include the word gender in there or not, and the world is indeed there are gender, there are men and women exist, male and female exist. So genders, whether we want to use the word gender, when obviously that's just built on top of and inextricably tied to sex, right? Asking yourself, how do I prepare my children for the tough realities of a gendered world, is a perfectly rational thing to ask yourself, because I mean, you shouldn't even really need to ask yourself that specific question, in that it is just yes, like the concept of gender exists, it is a gendered world because men and women exist and men and women are genders, right? But you shouldn't even have to ask yourself that question. It's just obviously you are preparing your children for the realities of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly. And there's a real cruelty, I think, in saying, no, I'm not going to prepare them for the realities of the world. I'm going to prepare them to have really noisy tantrums if they ever come across any harsh realities.
Yeah, exactly. So being prepared to challenge all forms of sexism, misogyny, injustice, and oppression. It's like,
I mean, it's that point you made earlier about him being a narcissist. Like, who but a narcissist would want and would seek to force their opinions and personalities on their children?
but
Because
even if
most people, you know, who are decent think, well, I have strong opinions, but I am aware that I could be completely wrong, aren't they?
I don't think that occurs really to this guy in quite the same way. So, like it is that thing of having that kind of somewhat narcissistic thing of saying, a feminist dad doesn't ask, how do I prepare my children for the tough realities of the world? As far as he's concerned, he has hit upon it's a kind of quasi-religious position in that, as far as he's concerned, he's found the better thing. So preparing your children for the tough realities of the world, that's what people have been doing for centuries and centuries. But I found this better thing. I have found the magical, I've seen the light, and I've got the special answer, which is to prepare them to challenge all forms. It's a lot of stuff, right? Sexism, misogyny, even though you'd think he just like, I bet he doesn't include misandry in there. Like,
it totally just like appears to me that like he sees a promised land up ahead, and it's like the price you have to pay is that your children can never be happy or themselves. They have to be indoctrinated and made completely dysfunctionally outraged at everything and despise the world and have zero gratitude for the fact that we're so bloody lucky these days.
I think it's also the case that, say, if he succeeds, right, and he does indeed raise people who are prepared to raise children who are prepared to challenge all forms of sex, blah 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 blah, all the thing. So say if he succeeds in that, and they are indeed prepared to challenge all forms of, list of buzzwords, right? Think how that affects those children socially. Challenging all of those, like that really, that has a significant impact on like social development and all of that stuff that just and it's I'd again, like, not claiming to be a mind reader, but I would predict, and I think I would be right in saying that he just that kind of those kind of concerns about the impact preparing your, like, raising children to do, like, he would view that as a kind of a sacrifice that he's prepared to make.
Yeah, it's like raise a tribe of cry bullies because they'll be really popular in the classroom.
But even if we assume that, like, being popular is not the is not the kind of the goal that you should be striving for, it's the case that
that's true, but when I say that, what I'm suggesting is not that they will not be popular, it's that they'll be despised. And there's a difference between not being popular and being actually despised, because no one can open their mouth without you jumping down their throats and claiming that they are sexist. What are the other things? All the other things. Sexist and all the other things.
Yeah, it's a
Vastly despised. Very unpleasant.
It's also, as we could quite clearly like and easily recognize, that that's being prepared to challenge all of those things. And obviously, you know, like raising children to do that, you then kind of think, okay, at what age are these children then supposed to be being prepared to challenge all of those things? Because it's not only is it obviously a recipe for unhappiness and a recipe for loneliness and lots of other unpleasant things that end in ness, right? But like it's a real, it's that kind of you know, that the phrase with the only you can prevent forest fires, and then you're just like, me? It's that kind of attitude that it's not a healthy way to raise children, to kind of go, look, you need to be prepared to challenge all of these, you know. And I'd be willing to bet that there are probably like more things that he could have put in that kind of list there, of, because as like, again, it's that what's that Anita Sarkeesian line? I think it kind of went relatively.
What do you think is problematic?
Well, she said, I think this was on stage with like Jermaine Greer or something in Australia, and she said everything is sexist, everything is racist, and you have to point it all out. Like, not exactly word for word, but it's very, very right. And like, it's one thing to kind of research this stuff as an adult and decide that what you want to do is challenge X, Y, and Z, right? But to raise your children to believe that it is their, I mean, he uses the word duty here in the talking about himself, of the kind of, instead he acknowledges that it's his duty to raise people who are, but I think that the word duty also
applies to children in this instance. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's not. I think he doesn't use the word duty by
instill in them an idea that it's their duty.
Yeah, and it's a which then strangely contrasts, because obviously it's always the case with these kind of things, that there's this kind of strange cognitive dissonance that has to take place. And that, like he says, immediately after that, he says, a father figure owes it to the rest of humankind to cultivate a non-violent and non-dominant demeanor, modeling for his children an attitude of acceptance and an appreciation for diversity. And you kind of think diversity of thought or diversity of attitude is probably not in that list, but like like, how are you going to do like
kind of meaningful diversity?
But it's a good question of how are you going to do that, because like, if you're going to be prepared to challenge all forms of the things, right? That's quite a, you're going to have to be, you have to be quite a dominant personality, to do that, right? You're challenging all of these.
That's a good bloody point. I don't want to dominate you children, but you have to do this.
But it's also the case that, so he says, modeling for his children an attitude, that non-dominant demeanor, right? It's going to be a very difficult, and obviously I don't want to give them tips here as to point out the inconsistencies in the worldview, but they're not listening to this, so who cares, right? But like, if you're going to raise children who are confident enough and prepared to challenge all of the things, like, how are you going to raise those children when you're modeling a non-dominant demeanor and an attitude of acceptance.
Exactly, and I wonder what exactly he's accepting, because like this article is like list after list after list of things he will not accept. So, you know.
Yeah, I think it's
a list of things he does accept, to be honest. I suspect it'd be pretty short.
Yeah, that would yeah, it's a kind of weird thing.
I mean, the beginning of it, though, is pretty tragic. So he talks about his own...
The headline... Yeah, I definitely wanted us to touch on that.
Yeah, he talks about his own experiences of being a feminist dad. And talks about how many nights when I'm lying in bed before falling asleep, the first thing I feel is regret. And I mean, I think every parent has some nights when they feel regret, and you know, maybe I'm just misinterpreting his use of the word many, but you know, many sounds like an awful lot. And the reason it is because he thinks of all the problematic interactions he's had with his kids during the day.
Well, the thing that one of the reasons why I suspect you're right when I don't think you're misinterpreting the word many there, right? In that what he's describing reminds me of obviously it's an anxiety disorder, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder is a anxiety disorder, and obviously, you know, but like and as such, it's a very complex, and it comes in a variety of different forms. But like what he describes there, and I'll read it out again. Yeah, so you've said it, but I'll read that out again there. But yeah, so many nights when I'm lying in bed before falling asleep, the first thing I feel is regret. I think of all the problematic interactions I've had with my kids during the day. I replay them in my mind, reviewing my choices, condemning my errors. Then I resolve to be a better parent. You know, and it's like what he's describing there is obsessive compulsive behavior.
If it's many nights, yeah. But also it's kind of what I find odd about it is what Jimmy Stewart didn't do in It's a Wonderful Life. So he didn't shout at his daughter and then realize his error and lie awake in bed feeling regret and condemning himself and resolving to be better. He goes back and he picks her up and he holds her and he apologizes. You know, that's what you do when you get it wrong as a parent. You hold on to your kids for dear life and tell them that you're a wrong idiot and you're sorry. You know, I don't see what good he's doing, because he doesn't say that he, you know, is honest with his children and explains why he thinks he could have done better. He just seems to beat himself up about it. And then, I mean, just after that, in the next paragraph, he's honest, he says, that at first becoming a feminist dad hurts. And that's because it seems to betray the customary good dad story. And to go all in on the prevailing good dad story undoubtedly betrays feminism. I mean, that's a damning indictment of feminism, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the prevailing good dad story is. Do you know of a prevailing good dad story?
It's so, to be honest, Elizabeth, it's so badly written that it's hard to understand what he's actually trying to say. Like, if that makes sense,
yeah,
there.
I don't see any evidence for a prevailing good dad story, to be honest. And
he says the customary good dad story, so he's using this as though he's using, and maybe like he seems to think that in this article he has defined what that means, but he says to go all in on feminism seems to betray the customary good dad story. To go all in on the prevailing good dad story undoubtedly betrays like I don't think he realizes how bad that makes feminism look, and I think I would also suspect that he doesn't know what to go all in on feminism means. Like, quite. I don't think he understands how far down in his scuba suit he would have to go into the depths of like psychological dysfunction and misery and human suffering. But I don't think he. I think in the same way he says many dads today find themselves paralyzed as they confront conflicting messages. I think if anyone is, I think he's talking about himself there. I think there's a certain amount of projection going on.
No, I mean, where are these messages coming from? And doesn't feminism generally advocate for positive female role models? And if there is a customary prevailing good dad story, isn't that a positive narrative that would encourage fathers to be good dads?
You would think that
telling girls, good girl stories would encourage them to be the best girls they can, because his idea of what we should replace the good dad story with seems to be absolutely critical of dad's story, and I don't see what good that would do personally, but also I just think it's completely polarized from what feminists think is good for women and girls. And and hang on, don't they say that gender is a social construct? So if gender is a social construct, then why do we have to treat men and women so differently in terms of giving women good role models and positive narratives to build their self-esteem, and criticizing men and boys relentlessly so they stop being so bloody awful? You can't have both. You can't have they need to be treated differently, but there's no difference.
Well, you can have both if you're willing to, not if you're willing, because it's not like they're aware of it, but you can have both. You can believe contradictory things and then suffer the consequences of what that does to your mind. And obviously, people point out this kind of these kind of things, because sometimes pointing out those contradictions, that kind of cognitive dissonance of you believe X and you believe that X is not X, there's short enough things that you can encompass in that you can put in a tweet, and people do point out the kind of, if you believe this, you can't also believe this, but yet quite evidently you claim to believe both. Which is it?
Mm-hmm.
And the result is that it causes, what he described here with being paralyzed as confronting conflicting messages, and obviously, I kind of find it difficult to kind of emulate that kind of, I don't understand how someone does that, where they're believing two completely contradictory things and then not noticing that 40 seconds ago they said a thing that they're completely contradicting now. Like I don't understand how they're able to do that, but it's just I think it's just a kind of, I can only assume that it's kind of their own kind of moral compass being pulled in kind of different directions, and like being described there, of the kind of, to go all in on feminism seems to betray the customary good dad story. To go all in on the prevailing good dad story undoubtedly betrays feminism. It's the case that someone like him is has that kind of serious problem, and you know, he has more self-awareness than some people I think like he says, just slightly further on from there, he says, and he's describing many dads today who find themselves paralyzed with the conflicting messages. He says they feel whiplashed when their good intentions backfire, and it's like, well, it's not necessarily that your good intentions are backfiring. It's that your good intentions are interpreted with like, you're not being given the benefit of the doubt at all, because you are dads, and with the feminist framework, dads should not be given the benefit of the doubt. Dads should not ever be, you can't possibly, you shouldn't say, oh well, he had good intentions. It should always be the least charitable interpretation.
Yeah, and speaking of uncharitable interpretations, he describes a little later on the taken for granted assumption that cisgendered men, especially fathers, are entitled to define and or be the protagonists of the narrative reality that shapes everyone else's experience. The prioritization of a dad's life is often cemented into our institutions. Like, I just do not, I can't imagine the world that this man sees.
I was like, when I read that, I was kind of thinking, okay, so this is like, this, like, Father's Day must be like I don't know what month Father's Day is on like his planet, but like
every day is Father's Day on his planet.
But yeah, I mean, like,
and I mean, you know, because he gives an example, the example of medical research still approaches adult male anatomy as the default. But it's like, you know, if all that's true, patriarchy's doing a bloody terrible job, isn't it? Because the life expectancy gap is still in favor of women.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why he has to be very brief there, and there are like, I mean, we could have a long conversation as to why, like if you're going to do biological experimentation and medical research, right? There's if you ask experts who actually work in the field of medical research why it might be slightly easier to use adult male anatomy rather than adult female anatomy, like, you don't need to go, like, you don't need to it shouldn't take you too long to work out that if you're wanting to try and control for variables and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be slightly easier to do that with male anatomy than it is for female anatomy. Yeah, right?
But we also have this, you know, thorny difficulty of ethics and the ethics of consent for medical procedures. And to my knowledge, more men are willing to participate in these studies than women are.
Yeah, and obviously when something goes wrong, the research, like, I think you're less likely to make the headlines if something goes very wrong. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, it's a whole. That's a long kind of conversation there, which we'd have to have like another time, I think, but there's a reason why he's kind of having to be very kind of brief there. But yeah, it's evidently just, I think quite a lot of the kind of people who are going to be listening to this will view that as being utterly delusional, to say that the prioritization of a dad's life is cemented into our institutions. So
it's really just incredible that someone can look out at the world and that's what they see. I think I'd like to wrap up with a suggestion for a fifth way to be a feminist dad, though, unless you've got anything else you wanted to comment in Jordan's piece.
Yeah, I suppose we haven't we haven't kind of gone through it in any kind of we've just kind of jumped around kind of all over the place, so it's quite possible for anyone listening to this to be like, I still don't know what the four foundational, like the four what was the thing, give me the second. Yeah, it's going to be hard to find it, but you know, these kind of you know, four foundational principles, like, you know, to the people listening, you're not missing much, and it is just the kind of stuff we've been talking about, just kind of littered all throughout the thing. So I don't have any additional to say. But what was your fifth way?
Well, I would suggest that the best way to be a feminist dad is don't.
Yeah, that's yeah, you could just write the word "don't" across the side
in French letters. Don't panic. Don't be a feminist dad.
So yeah, and if you are going to if you are going to be a feminist dad, like, you need to really work out what feminist means. And I don't think paying $159 for this special Rad Dad Deluxe Edition Father's Day gift box, I don't think you're going to find answers in that box. You're yeah, you're not going to find good stuff in there.
So finally, a happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. My heart goes out to any dads who aren't spending today with their beloved children.
I would concur.
Well, that's all, folks.